So we're going to be looking at the following areas. We're going to look at register. Register talks about how formal or informal language is, and in this case we're looking at a letter of complaint, which is obviously a formal piece of writing. Okay. Second thing we're going to look at is briefly at the use of the passive voice, which is going to be useful in terms of writing this kind of formal letter. We'll look at how to start a letter appropriately, what kind of, how do we greet the person that we're writing to, what the opening line is, etc. We're going to look at the body of the letter, the content, the main content. We're going to look at how to end the letter appropriately. Okay, so from start to finish, basically. So first of all, register. Some things to take into consideration. And register, essentially, we're looking at formal versus informal. So there are many different kinds of register. There's the kind of language we would use in scientific journals, academic writing, literature, etc. But in general terms, register refers to basically level of formality. And as I said before, a letter of complaint is a formal piece of writing, and as such it has characteristics specific to formal writing. Okay, so which of these is more formal? First of all, full forms, for example, is not, does not, etc., have not, or contractions, isn't, doesn't, haven't, etc. Which of these is more formal? Have a little think for a second. And of course, the answer is the full form, is not. So we would prefer to use the full form in a formal letter. Khalifa and others, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them at the end of the masterclass, and you can write in your questions and preguntas and questions on the Zoom chat. Okay, so full forms we need to use. Here's the next one. Everyday words such as enough or less common words such as sufficient. Which of these are synonyms, of course, enough and sufficient. Which of these is more formal? And of course the answer is sufficient. Sufficient is more formal than enough. Here's the next one. Full words or expressions, for example, especially, or acronyms and abbreviations, short forms of words, for example, ESP instead of especially, and so on. Which is more formal? And of course the answer is full words or expressions, especially. There are, however, some acronyms and abbreviations which are formal. For example, AGM stands for Annual General Meeting, and there would be no problem including that in a formal letter or whatever. But in general terms, you should avoid acronyms and abbreviations in a formal piece of writing. Okay, next one, exclamation marks, such as unbelievable, or no exclamation marks. For example, I could not believe it. Which of these two is more formal? And of course the answer is B, no exclamation marks. We would not use exclamation marks in a piece of formal writing. Okay? Here's another one. A personal tone, why not, or why don't you? Or a more impersonal tone. In this case, to make a suggestion, it would be advisable to. Okay, in both cases, we're making a suggestion. Which of the two would be more formal? And of course, Sorry, it should be B, the impersonal tone. It would be advisable to do something. Sorry, that one's a little mistake there. Forget about that one. Which of these is more formal? The active voice, they delivered the item, they, the subject, the people who delivered the item, or the passive voice. For example, the item was delivered. Which of these two would be more formal? And of course, it's the passive voice. So it's my recommendation to use the passive voice, if you can, in a more formal piece of writing. Okay. As I say, I will answer all the questions at the end as well as I can. So I mentioned that we would prefer to use the passive voice in a piece of formal writing. So let's see if we can put these active sentences on the left into the passive voice on the right. Okay, so the first one says, the staff served me very quickly. This is active, the subject is the staff. In the passive, remember we use the verb to be plus the past participle. Well, served is in the past, so we use the verb to be in the past, I was, and then the participle served very quickly. I was served very quickly. This is the passive version of the staff served me very quickly. They assured me that there was a vegetarian option. Again, verb to be plus the past participle. I was assured that there was a vegetarian option. They told us we would have to wait for 2 hours. We, in this case it's we, so what's the verb to be? Again, it's in the past. They told us. We were told that we would have to wait for 2 hours. I trust you will never make this mistake again. I trust means kind of like I hope, or I trust you will never make this mistake again. I trust this mistake will never be made again. So you have the verb to be in the infinitive here after will, and then again, the past participle. They should have checked our booking more carefully. This is an active. They is the subject, the people who do the action. In the passive, our booking should have been checked more carefully. Should have been checked more carefully. In this case, the verb to be is in the participle because it's after have, and then the past participle of the main verb checked. Okay, so as I said before, in a piece of formal writing, such as a letter of complaint, we would prefer, where possible, to use the passive voice as it's more formal. Okay. So starting the letter, we're going to look at the greetings and the opening lines. Okay, so let's start with the greeting. If you know the person's name, the person you're writing to, you happen to know their name because you're replying to another letter and they've signed it or whatever, then we start the greeting with either, if it's a man, dear Mr. Green in this case. If it was a woman, and this has changed recently, we prefer to use Ms. Words like, things like Mrs., for example, are considered incorrect these days. It assumes that someone is married, and in nowadays it's not considered correct. So if it's a man, it's Mr., and if it's a woman, Ms. Okay? If you don't know the person's name, okay, we've got a couple of options. The most common one we will use is dear Sir, Madam. Notice Madam, there's not an E at the end. It's not French, not Madame. It's dear Sir / Madam, or you can write or, dear Sir or Madam. And then even more formally, to whom it may concern, although this is kind of falling out of use. It's not used so often these days. So we prefer to use dear Sir or Madam if you don't know who the person is you're writing to, their name. Okay, so how do we start the letter? What's the kind of opening lines? Well, these are some typical ways we can start a letter of complaint. The first thing you have to do is identify what you're writing about. The person who's reading your letter, they should know right away what you're talking about. Okay, so here are some examples. I'm writing to express my dissatisfaction. Dissatisfaction means you're not happy, or disappointment with, or concern about. That's another alternative. I'm writing to express my concern about something. And then you talk about the problem. I'm writing on behalf of. If you're writing, you're a member of an organization or something, and you're writing for that organization, you're writing on behalf of them. Again, I'm sorry to inform you that we were not at all satisfied with X, Y, or Z. Another possibility, I'm writing to complain about the treatment we received, or the service, or whatever. Again, you have to specify what the problem was. And I'm writing to draw your attention to, and this is to make the manager or the whatever aware of the problem. I'm writing to draw your attention to something. Okay, so we've got the greeting, we've got the opening line. Again, just choose one of these kind of these examples in your own letter. So now I'd like you to choose the correct option. Can you remember? If I know the person's name, which of these should I write? Dear Sir, Madam, Dear Mr. X, to whom it may concern. If I know the person's name, which is the correct option here? And of course, the answer is Dear Mr. X, Dear Mr. Green, or Dear Ms, as I said, if it's a woman. Okay, so as I say, we've got the greeting, we've got the opening line. Let's look now at the body of the letter, the content. So first of all, we need to go through the complaints. What was wrong? What happened that you were not happy about? Okay, and to do this, we need to put everything in a logical order. And to do this, we will use linking expressions, okay? In most cases, in this example, we're using a lot of what we call sequencers to say the order of the things that happen to us. So I'd like you to focus on the words which are in bold and try to think about what other expressions do you know that we could use instead of these words. So here we go. First of all, that's the first expression. When we arrived to check into the hotel, we were told that we would have to wait for over 2 hours for the room to be made ready. So that's the first problem. You had to wait for a long time. Secondly, this is the other expression. My wife and I are both vegetarian. We don't eat meat. And we had been assured by your staff when booking that the hotel restaurant would have vegetarian options available. But this was not the case. There weren't any vegetarian options. As a result, we had to eat in a local restaurant at additional cost to ourselves. As a result, in fact, is another linking expression, but we're not going to look at that just now. Furthermore, when we complained at the reception, the staff were extremely rude and unhelpful. They were rude, they talked to us in a bad way, and unhelpful. They wouldn't help us with our problems. Finally, when I was given the bill, notice we're using passives throughout this. I was given the bill instead of they gave me the bill. I had been charged for items from the minibar which I had not used. Okay? So, focusing on the linking expressions, first of all, secondly, furthermore, finally. Can you think for a moment of some alternative expressions to use for each of these So let's start with first of all, and what kind of expressions we could use for first of all. Well, of course, we can use firstly, or to begin with. I'm just giving you some examples. There are other possibilities. Secondly, the next thing, or then, or even next, we could use. Furthermore, we could use what is more. This is to make an additional point. Not only that, but, or if this were not enough, these are all to make additional complaints, to identify additional problems. And then for your final problem that you mention, finally, lastly, last of all, or last but not least. These are all alternatives that you can use. So when you write your own letter, you can choose any of these to kind of put your writing into a logical sequence. Okay, so still on the body of the letter, I want to look now at some problems and how to demand action, how to say what you want the hotel, the restaurant, or whoever you're writing to do as a result of your complaint. So, we've got a number of expressions here and two categories. One is problems, the problems that you had, and the second is the action you want them to take, what you would like to happen. Okay, so we've got the delay was unacceptable. I am therefore requesting a full refund. That's a formal way to say I want my money back. I trust that the item will be replaced. That means I want another one that works or whatever. There seems to be a problem with the battery, with the antenna, with whatever. I would be grateful if you could look into this matter. This means I would like you to find out what has happened. When I checked the item, I found that it was damaged. There was an error in the bill. You charged me too much money or whatever. Unless you do X, I will have no option but to do Y. That's kind of like a threat. You're saying, give me the money back or whatever, or I will go to my lawyers or whatever. Okay, so problems you faced. The delay was unacceptable is a problem. You received the item too late. I'm therefore requesting a full refund is to ask for your money back, so it's what you would like to happen. I trust that the item will be replaced, again, as demanding action. There seems to be a problem with X, as talking about a problem that you had. I would be grateful, so that should be grateful, not grateful, a little typing mistake there. I would be grateful if you could look into this matter, if you can investigate what has happened, is what you want them to do. When I checked the item, I found that it was damaged, is a problem that you identified. There was an error in the bill. You charged me too much money, again, as a problem. Unless you do X, I will have no option but to do Y, is saying what you want them to do, unless you do X. Okay. So, we've looked at the greeting, open the letter, the body of the letter. Now we have to close the letter in an appropriate way. Some typical closing lines we can use. I look forward to hearing from you in due course. In other words, I want you to write back to me soon. I hope you can take steps to make sure this mistake does not happen again, if it's an error in your bill or whatever. I await your prompt reply. Again, you want them to answer your letter very quickly. I would be grateful if you could look into this matter. I want you to investigate what has happened and try to ensure it doesn't happen again. Okay, so Closing the letter at the very end of the letter, you have the beginning, Dear Sir, Madam, or Dear Mr. Green. You also close the letter in appropriate way. So if you've used the name of the person, for example, Mr. Green or Ms. Wilson or whatever, we use yours sincerely. Or in America, they prefer to use sincerely yours. In British English, I would use the first one, yours sincerely. If you haven't used the person's name, if you don't know what it is or whatever, if you use Dear Sir or Madam, we use yours faithfully, or again, faithfully yours. Okay? So, let's kind of summarize this. See if we can match the sentences with the part of the letter where they would appear. So, we've got yours faithfully. I'm therefore requesting a full refund. Dear Sir or Madam, the first problem was the microphone, and I'm writing to complain about. And then we've got the greeting, the opening line, what went wrong, demanding action, and closing the letter.